Welcome to the Digital Remodeler Podcast. So glad you've chosen to join us today. And with me is Mike Kinsey from Mak Mechanical. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Great to see you, Carl. Happy to do so.
And Mike, you have been so gracious to come on and share your story. And Mike and I had a chance to meet last week, and he's got a great story that I wanted him to come on. And so many of you listening, you're out in the trenches and you're wondering, are you ever going to be able to get from where you are today to where you want to be? And I felt like Mike had a story that was going to be encouraging to you. He's going to give you some insights of some of the things you need to be thinking about as you grow. And so, Mike, thanks again for being willing to come on and share your journey with us.
No problem. It has been a long journey, and I'm more than happy to share some of the stories from along the way because it's certainly been an interesting ride for sure. One that, many chills, thrills, and spills, some accidental wins, and some intentional items that turned out to be mistakes. So it's an absolute. I was joking the other day about I sent one of my guys on a course and it's called an HVAC MBA. And I said, that's about right. That's what you need to go forward in the business for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's start off with a little background. So, you are come from a third generation sheet metal worker, so it's a family trade. And did you ever consider doing anything else, or was the trade always the plan?
The trade wasn't actually always the plan. Originally, when I got out of school, I was working for a stockbroker, and
Oh, okay.
so it's kind of not even whatsoever related. It's completely not at all close. But I was working for a stockbroker. I got a job through a family friend and was working away there, and I found myself in the middle of an office cubicle in the middle of on the 37th floor, thinking to myself, is this where you want to be? So my father and my grandfather were both sheet metal workers. And my father, he said, give it a try. You can always go back to being a sheet or, working in the financial industry. So, I signed on and I thought I would try it out. And I didn't think I'd stick with it forever, but here I am.
Good. So, you mentioned in your about on your website that you left your previous employer because you came to this point where you hit an ethical misalignment and you felt like you needed to make a change. And so that was kind of your defining moment, if you will, that you knew you had to do something different. Um, what was kind of that breaking point where you just said, I've got to, I can't do this anymore, so something's got to give.
Well, funny you should ask because it did start out to be what happened was I was working and finished my apprenticeship through a pretty big outfit. We did a lot of work for car plants and big projects. And so they would go through periods of time where they'd have I mean, this is 35 years ago. They'd start a $60 million job, and so sometimes there was some ups and downs. And it was one time I had a great run there. I did. I had a great run and wonderful people that I worked with. And So we were on a bit of a break. My second son was born, and we kind of got into, well, my wife had to go back to work early. And so I asked my employer, I said, why don't you lay me off for a little while? I said, I'll be back here when we start the Ford job in the fall. No worries. So I went to work for this guy in locally here. My job was about an hour and 15 minutes away. So I went to work for this local guy and I was doing a bit of work and, I was doing service work. And the one day, I did I was trying to be proactive. I was trying to do the right thing. So I got a phone call on a weekend. I was the guy on call. So I go down and I look and I needed a Lennox part, which my dealer was not a Lennox dealer. So I thought, I'm just gonna, this is how long ago it was. I opened the phone book and I looked in the phone book and, oh, here's a Lennox dealer. I didn't know the guy, but I just thought I'd just reach out, and say, hey, listen, I'm on call. I need this Lennox motor. So I called the guy and I said, hey, I need this Lennox motor. I work for this guy, this other guy, one of your competitors. And the guy was great. And he said, okay, no problem. I'll meet you over the shop. Gave me the motor. I went in, put the motor in, was the hero for the customer. They thought this was the best thing since sliced bread, over and above. And then on the Monday, I come into the shop and I thought this guy was going to be real, like, wow, you're a real go-getter. Well, he lost his mind because he didn't like any of his competitors and didn't get along with his competitors. So he lost his mind, and we got right into it. And I said, you know what? I think that, we have different values. And I say, so I left that day and I went home, drove to Toronto, another hour away, registered my business. I had no intention before that day of going into business. There's nothing like a bit of spite to give you a kickstart and some energy. And I did. You know what? I went into business, and away I went. And the in fact, that guy is no longer in business, but we're still there. We're still here. So it kind of worked out. But truthfully, that misalignment in values is what what put me to what put me into business. And I didn't even think I'd stay in business. As a
Mm.
matter of fact, the people that I worked for did my apprenticeship with, one of the brothers offered to loan me money to get my business going. So I look back now with no regrets on that, for sure.
Oh, that's good. Now, day one, so you go and register, and now what am I going to do?
I
And one
didn't
of the things
have
you and I talked about, you started with a borrowed pickup truck from a neighbor.
I
So,
did.
so what's going through your mind when you turned the key that first morning?
So when I got home from registering the business, I just made a big list of people I contacted. I had no contacts because I lived in one city and worked far away in another city. So my business contacts weren't from the Greater Barrier Simcoe area. So the guy that I put the motor in for was so happy that he called up and he said, "Listen, I got a friend. I want to put an air conditioner in." So I was like, "Oh, great, great." I don't have a truck. I got a car. So my neighbor across the street, he was a great guy. We were good friends. And he said, well, here, use my pickup truck. So I borrowed his pickup truck. And I think even my wife might have been working. And so his wife watched my kids while I went and installed probably the first piece of equipment that Mak Mechanical ever did. And it kind of worked out. And we're still friends today. That neighbor is still there. I still live across the street from him. And we just had dinner last week, and we had a good laugh about that.
Oh, that's great. So, what would you say were your biggest fear in those early days when it was just you? What were you most afraid of?
Well, because I didn't have a lot of contacts in the area, I was like, well, am I going to run out of work? Am I going to starve to death? Can I pay my mortgage? Am I going to be able to do all that? So that was the biggest unnerving part. Plus, I didn't have that kind of capital to, just jump right into anything big. I just, job per job, like, that's how I had to get going. So that had me concerned, and I did a couple of jobs, bought a truck, and kind of went from there. Like it actually, for me, like, I didn't have time to worry. I did not have time to worry. I was so busy. I got two little kids. I got a wife. I got a mortgage. I had to work, and I had to make this work, in order to pay my bills. So I don't think I had I probably should have had way more fear, but I did not.
Oh, that's good. So now you kind of, you got your head down, you're grinding, you're going, and this transition takes place. You have to make this leap from being Mike the tradesman to Mike the CEO. And did you find it hard to put down the tools and start picking up the spreadsheet?
Very, because I was not, accounting was not my strong point. So really for me to do this, uh, looking back, if I could say that there was a defining moment that I wish I would have paid a little more attention to in the early days, because I grew really fast. Like within a year, I had, four guys, couple of trucks. Like it went way faster than I thought. We did quality work, and the word got out there, and so therefore, all of a sudden I've got employees, I've got tax remittances, all these things. So a friend of mine recommended a bookkeeper, and she came in, and thank goodness, because that was definitely not my strong point. But I would come back to that point at a much later date. As I said, Carl, the growth of the company was continual. It just did this for the entire 34 years. Like not this, but kind of, just a gradual, just enough that I didn't notice how much busier it was getting. And the books, I look back then, and it was, we weren't as profitable because I wasn't watching the gross and the net margin. I was just like, can I pay my bills? Can I pay my staff? Great. Can I buy a snowmobile? Excellent. So I didn't have the time to think about that. But many years later, I would circle back to that when I was, by that time I had like, I don't know, maybe 20, 20 guys, maybe 25 guys. And one of the groups I belonged to in my Rotary Club, it was an accountant that was doing work for me. And this guy started saying, I don't know how you got where you got with your accounting knowledge, but starting next week, we're going to have a beer in your garage every couple of weeks, and we're going to learn about accounting much more. And I did. And now it's second nature. I can, but back then, like I said, it was a slow rise. So didn't have the time, and I was able to pay the bills and stay in business. So but I look back to that first crucial point. You did say that pinch point where Mike went from the tools being the best tech I had to, now I'm not even the guy you want to come and check your furnace. But, I went from that guy on the tools to salesman, part-time bookkeeper, ordering, I even had back in the early days, I even had bought some sheet metal equipment and I had it in my garage at home. So like, the kids that come home or be guys in our driveway, and I'm working nights making up fittings and sheet metal parts for people. And so it was a very, very interesting time.
That's good. Now, you cover a huge range from, residential furnaces to large commercial projects. A lot of contractors stick to one thing. Why did you decide to do both? And then how do you manage that complexity?
Well, it is difficult because you're right. A lot of my competitors, they do new subdivisions, they don't touch anything else. And it comes back to that complete no fear of the unknown. And I was trying to make sure I could always pay my bills. And I always watched the markets. Like, sometimes housing would be busy and then it would be dead, and commercial would be busier. So my business literally, one year residential was busier, the next year my commercial was busy. And we were started out with light commercial, like strip plazas, store fit outs and things like that. But then we all of a sudden we were doing $10 million mechanical jobs for a new long-term care home. And so, and yet we'll do a $10 million long-term care home, and we'll also come and fix your furnace for, $250. Like, it's and along the way I thought about separating the residential and commercial, but it's just really worked out. Like, probably if I was giving advice to somebody to do it, I probably would tell them, depending on your market, probably probably people who specifically do just residential or just commercial. they probably have slightly higher margins because we run into some inefficiencies. Our same service guy will go up and check a compress, a chiller, and then he's in somebody's basement, looking at their fireplace. So he's probably not as fast at fireplaces or as fast at chillers as the guy who specifically does it day in, day out. But alternately, because we do have that opportunity to do both, uh, we're always busy.
Yeah.
One segment is always busy. Right now, particularly, it's commercial work. Commercial work's on fire. We're busy, and in particular, long-term care homes and stuff like that are really, the government's put a lot of money into it, and we've become subject matter experts, and so we don't even have to look for that work. If somebody's building a long-term care home, we get a call. We might not get the job, but we're going to get an opportunity to bid.
That's good. That's good. Now, you hit this 30 truck milestone. And so as you grow to a fleet of 30 trucks, that also implies a lot of logistics, a lot of overhead. Um, so what was the hardest stage of growth? Going from 5 to 10 employees or breaking past the $1 million mark? What, as you look back, what would you say was really the hardest stage in your growth trajectory?
The hardest stage, probably you're right, was, I mean, you come along, the growth was fairly steady, but there was a stagnant period of time, I think, when we hit about 2 million. And all of a sudden, we were just over 2 million. We would run between 2 and 3 million. And it was like, I just couldn't get, like, I probably ran that flat for a few years. And at the time, we used to do a lot of sub work for a large mechanical company. They did all the big stuff, and we just did their sheet metal, really. And they ended up going on they ended up they're a union company, so they ended up starting. They had plumbers, millwrights, fitters, so they ended up starting a sheet metal division. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like that's going to cut my business in half. Uh, I'll never be able to get to $3 million a year. And almost immediately, we went to five,
Hmm.
and then seven, then nine. Like it kind of went in little increments, just like that, usually 2 million at a time.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. A lot of times you find that uh, the people that got you to one level aren't the people that get you to that next level. Did you find that there had to be some changes in some of your key people to get you
Yeah,
to those next levels?
100%. Again, if anybody asks, I went to SU, Sheet
Hmm.
Metal University. So I don't kid myself. I just brought in people that had talents that I did not have. I brought in a CFO, probably one of my better moves. Were better financially managed. I could never have gotten to those levels without bringing in a CFO. I brought in a general manager, and the general manager was actually by accident. It was supposed to be a temporary position. I had accepted a role through Rotary International to lead a global study exchange team to Taiwan for 6 weeks. Well, I'd never left my business for 6 weeks. So I had a guy who working for me part-time as a commission salesman. And he just said, I had plenty of notice, plenty of advance notice. I had like 9 months. And I said, well, he goes, well, I'll manage things while you're gone. So he kind of came on board as more of a, helper manager. And then when I was gone, he kind of ran that, and he stayed, and for another 13 years, which was just again another, I didn't plan it. I'd love to say I was that smart, Carl, but I did bring in people that were a good fit, so that we could take it to the next level. Even more recently, I brought in a young lady, and her only task is to sell commercial plan maintenances.
That's good.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
one of the things that you take pride in, and it's obvious just talking to you, looking at the website, You take pride in seeing tradespeople grow in their confidence, not just their skill. So, how do you train for character at Mac Mechanical and not just the skill?
Well, that's, not an easy task because a lot of times they arrive here from other companies or they're out of school and they're, just trying to learn their trade or continue on with their trade. And maybe, maybe some of the places they worked, like, didn't really, want, they didn't really care too much about the people, didn't care too much about the people, in their personal development as well. So I bring everybody, I still do most of my year-end reviews in myself. And I sit down because I don't get a chance to talk to them all the time because they're out on the field. They're being managed by our operations manager or our service manager. So I don't get as much conversation with them as I would like. So uh, it's great. And when I come in, I ask them, what's your professional goals? And then they're always surprised when I ask them their personal goals. And that usually takes a little prying, like, hey, like what, some of them, they say, hey, look, you know what? I'm really striving to buy a house. I got married. I want to buy a house. And, usually I'll check in with them every 3, 6 months, say, hey, how's that coming? You know, our company has an RSP program when, maybe, or you can also transfer that into a home ownership plan. And, some of them say, hey, you know what? I've been on the tools, doing installs forever. I'd really like to shift towards service. So it's great. And then I start kind of funneling them into some courses that will, we see how they do. And if they're going to, looks like they're going to work out, we have no problems investing in them and seeing where that goes.
That's incredible. I love it. I love it. Tap into their real reason why. Why are you
Yeah.
here? That's
Well, that's
great.
it. Because I tell them all, I said, if it's just a job, they sorry about I'm trying to get rid of my phone here because somebody's texting and it's my wife, so she'll be wondering why I'm not answering her
Yeah, yeah,
back.
that's important.
But a lot of the staff too, like I said, we got some young guys with some kids, and so we try and do events to try and cater to whatever, because whatever the crowd is at the time. We've had times where it was not as many little kids or whatever, so we always try and be inclusive with the staff. And I always do in August, I do a big barbecue. It's one of my favorite events. I do a barbecue here at the shop. I come here at 4:30 in the morning. I got the smoker going. These guys are just rolling in at 6:30, getting ready to head out on the road. I've been at the smoker for a couple hours, getting everything prepped, and they come back, and I always buy, like, they're gonna buy tools anyway, so I always buy a significant amount of tools and giveaway stuff, and we package it up so it's fairly even. But then at the end of the day, we just draw numbers, and that package number 27 you drew, that's what you're getting. So I do that, but after it's all done, then the trading begins. And it's so funny, and it's just one of our favorite days to engage with the staff for sure.
Oh, that's great. Now, your son Dave works alongside you as well. And so this is the, next generation coming alongside. But how do you navigate the father boss dynamic?
He doesn't work for me.
No, he doesn't.
He works for I've got an outside superintendent that looks after
Okay,
all the field work, and he works directly under him because
excellent.
when the father son dynamic is difficult. And I've got some other staff members here who used to work with their family and family businesses, as did my wife. So I know that it's really sticky, and I've tried to make sure that I avoided that by not putting them directly under me, so that we're not also at home talking about work, or hey, I'm really ticked off, you did a bum job, or hey, you did a great job. So we try and keep it separate. Inevitably, it comes out in a conversation too. And my godson works here too. He's one, he did his apprenticeship right out of high school. In fact, they have a Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program where they start their apprenticeship in high school, and he's been with me since then. So, my wife was in the delivery room when he was born. So there is a real family vibe around here. There's no getting away from it.
Sure. Now, seeing that, seeing this next generation involved, um, how does that make you look at the company's legacy? How does, as you're looking down the road, what does that do for you and just kind of your own strategy and thinking?
Well, everybody has their own vision, right? And I'm where I want to be. And as I bring the boys, kind of, get them more involved, even with some of my staff that may be involved with the company as well, it, it needs a different vision. Like my vision took us, to here, whether it was by accident or not. But my vision took us to here. And with as I kind of look forward to stepping back a little bit more, you know, they're going to bring their own. They're going to bring their own ideas and flavors, and I look forward to being here to guide them.
That's great. Now, you've served as district governor for Rotary, overseeing 44 clubs. How did leading a volunteer organization like that influence how you lead your paid staff?
Well, I do a bit of public speaking for Rotary, and I do specifically talk about that. I talk about how, um, you know, although I was, trained tradesman, I didn't get any leadership training from anyone. So I had to kind of figure that out myself. So when I was involved in Rotary, at the club level, I chaired a committee. So you're chairing a very small amount of people, little small group. And then eventually I ended up, chairing or being the club president. And now you got a whole different, now all of a sudden you find out about different dynamics and how people get along. So this is where I went. And it was great. And then I ended up as district governor, and now you got different provinces with different languages and people and different ideas. And so I would say that I derived an immense amount of my leadership skills from the skills that I picked up as leadership in Rotary.
That's good. And along those lines, you've done the international friendship exchanges. And so, having seen how business and trades work in other cultures, has that changed anything about the way you operate back home?
Yes, partly from I led a global study exchange team where I took four young professionals to Taiwan around 4 or 5 weeks, and it was, specifically a vocational and tour. So everybody went to wherever, they lined people up to go to different avenues. And for me, they took me to different job sites and different ways. That, I did pick up some stuff from that. But outside of that, I also had an export business at one time that ran parallel to this business. And I did a lot of exporting to Japan, Germany, Croatia. And so I did a lot of traveling and even the different building techniques here in North America. We put a vapor barrier up and things like, when we were doing some work in England, they just build brick airspace block. It's worked for 1,000 years. Why, so we were there kind of helping promote, energy efficiency, putting in vapor barriers, like that. I'd been to Japan many times with the export business, and there it's quite different because there is no margin for mistakes. they just are less forgiving about, oh, sorry, our guy left a mess. That would be devastating. Like, or hey, this we sold you this piece of equipment and it doesn't work. Like that's just not hugely accepted. So that's why here, when something doesn't work right, maybe it's that part of me that kicks in. I'm going, that's just not acceptable. Like, so yeah, definitely the work I did with Rotary internationally, and as well as the export, that shaped a lot about, how different cultures, deal with construction.
That's good. Now, a little, side here. You love racing and project cars. So, is there a parallel between building a race car and building a business?
All the parts got to work. You know what? And one little part can let you down, and you can have an epic failure. I'm a big car guy, which is something I also got from my father. My father was a big F1 and race car fan, and I guess I kind of got that from him. I don't do as much building cars as I do buying them and driving them, and I love that aspect. As I kind of look ahead to slowing down and stepping back a bit. I'm just in the middle of putting up another garage behind my house where I'm going to probably put a project car in there, and I'm going to hopefully, I've never done a start to finish, and I'm going to do that. But I would say, as far as a parallel between, absolutely, between race cars and doing project work, one part, one failure, and you're out.
Hmm,
So that's how I'm looking at that.
that's good. And then, you enjoy mentoring and spending time with your grandchildren. Uh, what does a successful day look like for you today compared to what it looked like 33 years ago?
Well, I'm definitely more intentional. As I said, I did a lot of things in the early days out of necessity. And now an ideal day is if my grandson who lives right close to us, who's also driving now, if he says, hey, Grandpa, you want to go for lunch, or you got time for this? I love to spend time with them, mostly in the evenings, and we do that. But I don't work the 13 hours a day anymore, but I definitely so I need to leave a little bit earlier than I used to. I'm an early riser, so I'm going to come in early anyway. But I'm definitely going to leave a little earlier than I used to. And that's the time I get to spend more with my wife or with some friends or with a hobby.
That's good. And just to kind of bring us to a close here, if you were talking to a young contractor who's listening right now, who wants to get their own company going, what's the one piece of advice you would give them to have that same trajectory you've had to make it through all the ups and downs and the hurdles and all the things they're going to have to navigate, as they grow? What's that one piece of advice?
I would say it's never too early to start thinking about next week. It's never too early to start thinking about next year. And, especially if you're a young guy getting into, your own business, you get wrapped up in the day to day, and you're trying to, just hustle through and make sure you make enough money you can pay your bills, pay your staff, and move on. But like, I would definitely put more of an emphasis on planning. And you can Google and get yourself a strategic plan, and it's never too early. You might think, well, it's just me and a helper. No, no, no. It's you and a helper today. When you go to that second truck, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to manage that? It's never too early to do a strategic plan.
Perfect. And then last piece of advice is for the person that's they're into it 15, 20 years, and it's time to start thinking legacy. What's your piece of advice for them?
It's going to come to an end one day. You might think it's going to last forever, but it doesn't. So it's, as I said, in the first part, it's not too early to start strategic planning for the future. And when I'm saying about the guys that are 15, 20 years in, it's ne it's not too early to start planning your exit. You gotta get on that early. You gotta decide, do I want to sell the business? Do I want to bring people in to run the business? Do I get family who wants to run the business? You got to start looking around. Usually probably most guys, if they've been in it for 15, 20 years, they've accumulated a great customer base and some customers that rely on them, and they're obviously doing some quality work if they've been around that long and they're still in business. So I would definitely say start thinking about your exit probably around the 15, 20 year mark, 100%, because uh, when it does come to the end, you've got just, there's the accounting portion, there's so many things. Do I own a building? Am I going to keep that building and rent it to if I sell it? There's so many pieces that you got to start thinking about. Even with the guys that are 15, 20 years, probably bought a building. Did they buy it in the company's name or did they keep it as a separate entity, which is what we did? It's not too early to start planning for that exit.
Fantastic. Mike, thanks for taking time to share your thoughts, your insights. And if somebody wants to learn a little more about you and your company, where can they check you out online? Where can they find out more about what you've done?
You can, myself, you can, like I'm on LinkedIn, as well as Instagram. Mac Mechanical has got a Instagram, Facebook, and its own LinkedIn page. Our website, www.macmechanical.com. That's MAK mechanical.com. Uh, all the information is there. It tells the story. Uh, I hired somebody more recently in the last few years to start doing a better job on our social media because again, that's not an area of expertise I have. So and they're doing an amazing job. They're doing you can if you went back in our Instagram and looked, you'll say, oh, that's right there. That's when he hired somebody.
That's good. Well, Mike, thanks again for taking time out for us today. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in today. And it's been great having you on the Digital Remodeler podcast.